And our next speaker is Avery Russell, and who's going to talk to us about ecological and evolutionary consequences of buzz pollination.
All right, well, thank you all for being here and to the organizers. I'm Avery, and I'm an assistant professor at Missouri State University, and I'm really excited to be talking to you today about some bee search. The work I'll be presenting here is the culmination of years of work across multiple labs and many co-authors, who you'll see cited in the relevant sections, so I hope you're as excited as I am. And if you'd like to collaborate on a grant to bring you here to either do master's or a postdoc, please let me know. Or if you know anybody who is looking for a student, please consider our lab at Missouri State University. Although do consider you might have to endure severe punishment. MSU is also hiring a tenure track animal ecologist. So if you'd like to join us, keep your eye out for an announcement in the coming days. And feel free to send me or our search committee head, Dr. Sean Marr, an email. Without further ado, though, let's carpe diem and get to the science. So foraging behavior is frequently implicated in driving evolutionary patterns in both animals and their biotic resources. For instance, herbivory often drives the evolution of plant defenses, such as shell thickness in acorns and the number and size of thorns in acacias. And in turn, this often results in reciprocal morphological evolution of the herbivore, such as increased snout length of acorn weevils that drill into the acorn and thickened lips of giraffes that offer protection from the acacia thorns. And in fact, the ecological and evolutionary consequences of animal foraging have been particularly well studied in pollinator mutualisms. For example, pollinators are thought to drive the evolution of nectar spur length, mechanical levers that limit access to floral nutrients, petal surfaces that allow pollinators to hold on, and other such traits. In turn, these floral traits are thought to drive the reciprocal evolution of pollinator morphology. For example, tongue length, body size, and the shape of hairs reflect adaptations that enhance collection of floral nutrients by pollinators. However, despite over a century of attention to reciprocal evolution of plant and pollinator morphology, we lack a clear understanding of whether floral traits drive the evolution of pollinator behavior and the distribution of pollinator taxa, and how behavior directly drives floral trait evolution. So to help answer this question, let's examine the ecological and evolutionary consequences of an incredibly widespread plant-bee mutualism called buzz pollination. Buzz pollination is thought to be an ancient mutualism between bees, which you see right here, 1,000 frames per second. We often collaborate with really skilled photographers, and so they get to bring in their thousands or tens of thousands of dollar cameras into the lab, and you can see this bee buzzing the pollen out of a flower here. And this is allowing them to extract pollen, their primary source of protein. And these are flowers with specialized tube-like floricidal morphology that requires buzzing for their pollen to be removed. So you could say it's a totally tubular mechanism, man. And flowers with floricidal morphology are thought to be nearly exclusively pollinated by buzzing bees, which use their indirect flight muscles to vibrate the pollen out of the flowers. And of course, I assume you're here just for the videos, so hopefully this one will leave you buzzing with excitement, and we'll see if the sound works on this thing. So you should have seen the bee buzzing these solanum flowers here, and these have tubular anthers, and you should have seen the pollen shooting out of the anthers at about 30 times the force of gravity. Now, it turns out that the ability to buzz flowers to extract their pollen is quite widespread in bees. So using the taxonomic list from Discover Life and a comprehensive literature review, we find that bees that buzz flowers are found in all 7 bee families and 17% of genera. So we estimate that upwards of 57% of bee species are capable of buzzing to extract pollen. So what are the evolutionary implications of this behavior for bees? Here we see a time and fossil calibrated bee phylogeny in which we constrained individual genera to be buzzing or non-buzzing. And this phylogeny reflects the results of a maximum clade credibility tree with an unconstrained root and a Bayesian uncorrelated relaxed clock model to estimate the ages of lineages. And in this phylogeny, we find that buzzing behavior is ancient and appears to have evolved in the early Cretaceous at the root of the bees. Furthermore, buzzing behavior is evolutionarily labile. It's been gained 45 times and lost 66 times across the bees. Finally, branching out, we find that buzzing behavior may be a key driver of bee diversification. In the clades indicated with the yellow stars, buzzing is significantly associated with greater diversification. However, much more work documenting the occurrence of buzzing, especially in the global south, will be required to determine if the association of buzzing and increased diversification is widespread across the bees. So given that buzzing behavior directly affects access to pollen, an essential food for bees, from a broad range of plant species, buzzing behavior might also influence bee biogeography. So we therefore examined how the biogeography of buzzing and non-buzzing species differed. So to accomplish this, we used the Discover Life Bee World Checklist to link buzzing and non-buzzing bee species to administrative areas. And we used state and province level data for those areas via the Global Administrative Areas database. We generated over 136,000 links between administrative areas and bee species distributions. So in this figure, you see the richness of all bees across all areas, where redder areas are richer and bluer areas are less rich. On this next map, however, you see that the patterns of buzzing species depart dramatically from the overall patterns of bee richness. Overall, a greater proportion of buzzing bee species are found in Eastern and Central America, as well as in Europe, the Middle East, South Africa, and Northeast Asia, and parts of South America. These are the regions marked in redder tones. Conversely, a reduced proportion of buzzing bee species are found in parts of Southern and Southeast Asia and most of Australia and Southern Central Africa. And these are the regions marked in bluer tones. These patterns also differ substantially among bee families. And here I'm going to show results for 4 of the 7 bee families in the interest of time. And again, redder indicates increased proportion of buzzing, bluer indicates decreased proportion of buzzing species. In Andrenidae, the patterns in North America and Europe are similar. However, a greater proportion of buzzing bee species are found in South America, whereas a much smaller proportion are found in East Asia or North Africa. For Calletidae, the patterns are quite similar between buzzing and non-buzzing species, except in Europe, where a greater proportion of bees buzz. Conversely, in Apidae, patterns are overall similar in most regions, but a greater proportion of species buzz in Northeast Asia, and fewer species buzz in parts of Southern and Southeast Asia. Polyctidae also show similar patterns, although fewer species buzz in Western South America and Southeast Asia. Given that there are large differences in the biogeography of the buzzing and non-buzzing species, we chose to chart the ecological drivers of these differences. And we considered 53 different variables as potential drivers of bee diversity and buzzing, which you see here. These will be on the test, so get memorizing. These variables include different elements of climate, highlighted in blue here, as climate and its facets are likely primary drivers of buzzing, including potentially via their impacts on plants. And furthermore, we include plant richness overall, as well as poricidal plant richness specifically as potential drivers, and these are highlighted in green. And to analyze effects of potential drivers, we ran regressions with each variable, and then used this to make the best model by using initially the variables with the strongest relationships with richness, and then sequentially removed variables which were not significant in the model until all variables were significant. So examining these same 4 bee families again, we find that the top driver of percentage buzzing species for a given region of 3 of the 4 families is, drumroll, poricidal plant richness. Furthermore, poricidal plant richness did not have a major influence on overall bee richness, highlighting that this driver is uniquely associated with buzzing bees. And adding to this, other lesser drivers like temperature, moisture, and latitude also differed from drivers of non-buzzing bee occurrence. And at last, but not least, if you squint your eyes, you can see that the hotspots of buzzing bee and poricidal plant species biodiversity largely overlap. Interestingly, many poricidal plant species occur where buzzing bee species have yet to be recorded. So given that buzzing bees are closely associated with pollination of poricidal plant species, this suggests there's a lot of work remaining to document buzzing bee biogeography. So far, we focused on the bee side of the story, but we've neglected to examine the evolutionary history of the poricidal plant species that are thought to require pollination by buzzing bees. So let's do that now. Flowers that conceal their pollen using poricidal morphology are really taxonomically widespread. So using taxonomic lists such as the 2013 plant list and a comprehensive literature review, we find that poricidal taxa comprise 22% of flowering plant families, 5% of plant genera, and a whopping estimated 10% of flowering plant species. Here we've illustrated the diverse ways to build a poricidal flower, and false colors indicate the structure of tissue involved, with corolla indicated in purple, filament indicated in orange, and anther indicated in blue. As you can see, poricidal flower morphology is widely diverse. Okay, maybe not that wild. Hopefully you appreciate my pollen sense of humor by now. So using a hidden character state dependent speciation and extinction model, we find that poricidal morphology is incredibly evolutionarily labile. It has at least 145 independent gains and over 200 independent losses. And this is a conservative estimate because, as we did with the bees, we're only able to examine patterns at the level of genera. Interestingly, we also find that net diversification rate of poricidal genera is often, but not always, lower than non-poricidal taxa. And while this would suggest that specialization via poricidal anthers can be a dead end, we find a different answer, or anther, if you will. When we examine transition rates, we find that transitions back to non-poricidal taxa occur more rapidly, suggesting it's possible to re-evolve non-poricidal floral morphology relatively easily. So pollen everything together, I've shown you that buzzing is an ancient pollen collection behavior that has evolved numerous times. I've given you evidence that the biogeography of buzzing bees differs from non-buzzing species, and that the top driver of buzzing bee prevalence is poricidal species richness. And likewise, we've demonstrated that poricidal morphology is incredibly prevalent and can result in reduced diversification, but plants can still escape this specialization. So with all of that, I'd like you to thank you for your time, my co-authors, my advisors, and my funding sources that have helped us keep pedal to the metal. With that, if you have any questions, I might have some answers for you, and feel free to follow me on Blue Sky or on Twitter.